Welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing Futures, the podcast for B2B marketers sponsored by Atsact, the B2B ad platform. Today, we are diving deep into a topic that continues to challenge even the most experienced teams, sales and marketing alignment. Despite best intentions, friction between sales and marketing still exists in many organizations. From misaligned definitions of a qualified lead to inconsistent campaign messaging, in this episode, we'll explore where the biggest breakdowns happen, what frameworks and rituals have helped bridge the gap, and how to ensure marketing efforts truly support sales outcomes. So I'm joined by three great guests, and I would love to hear a little bit about you. So Isabel, would you like to give a sentence on yourself? Welcome.
Sure, thank you for having me. So my name's Isabel Johnson. I am currently in a senior marketing kind of hybrid of brand and business marketing role for a professional services organization. My background is kind of purely B2B, spans professional services, but also media and the creative industry. So yeah, thanks for having me.
So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Grecia.
Hi, well, my name is Grecia Padron. I am currently working in marketing operations role in a tech company, and my background as well is mainly focused on B2B SaaS, but particularly digital marketing. So now I have the opportunity to be more on the operations side and understand more of this gap or more of these issues in between sales and marketing, because I'm in the portion of the business that actually connects both of them.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Grecia. And Sean, welcome.
Thanks, Joaquin. So my name's Sean Hughes. I'm the UK Field Marketing Manager for the public cloud side of the business at Rackspace Technology. I made the shift to B2B, kind of pure B2B, about 5 years ago. Before that, I was in organisations that were more B2C facing, albeit with some B2B responsibility. This is my first pure field marketing role, so kind of sales and marketing alignment is much higher up on my agenda perhaps than it was in previous roles, where I was a little bit more kind of all-round and focused on other kind of specialisms within marketing perhaps. So interesting to see how the conversation flows today and how Isabel and Grecia's experiences kind of compare or contrast with what I've experienced more recently.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for those great introductions. So let's start talking about the big picture. Where do you see the biggest breakdowns in sales and marketing alignment today?
I think that one of the biggest breakdowns that I see is the difference in criteria, because at least in my experience, there is a definition for what marketing thinks that could be a good lead, but then for sales, it could be something else. And once we can actually get on the same boat and decide like, okay, this is what for the organization in general, it's a good lead, then we can start with all of the frameworks and the rituals and all of the things to actually bridge the gap.
I feel like I definitely echo, a mismatch on criteria for leads as being something that it's the age-old problem, isn't it, in terms of having a breakdown between sales and marketing. But I feel like another thing that definitely causes issues is actually sometimes a fundamental distrust of marketing, I think, especially when it comes to lead quality. And I think that lack of trust, it's an interesting one, but I think it can often be symptomatic of like a deeper kind of cultural dysfunction. And really, if it's allowed to spread, it can really become organizational poison. And I think that another issue is obviously sales teams feel that marketing generated leads aren't truly qualified or relevant. And that can just lead to disengagement. And that skepticism can then become kind of a bit of a like self-fulfilling cycle. So sales don't follow up with the lead, conversion rates drop. It kind of reinforces that perception that the leads weren't even valuable to begin with. And it does come back to that lack of shared accountability. Sales, I've worked in organizations sometimes where some sales teams are really good at this, some less so, but sales often expect marketing to deliver pipeline-ready prospects, while marketing assumes that sales are going to nurture and then kind of convert those. So without the clear definitions, line KPIs, and kind of regular reviews on both sides, you just end up, again, back to that age-old problem of operating in silos. And that then leads to kind of missed opportunities, duplicated effort, friction, and it slows down growth. So I think, it's kind of When sales sees marketing as more of a strategic partner, not just kind of a content factory or an admin center, which are kind of common problems, you start to then kind of rebuild that trust and you're able to unlock some real alignment.
Yeah, I think I'd maybe just build on that, as well as the kind of misalignment on definitions. I think there's often misalignment on kind of metrics and KPIs. Oftentimes, kind of marketing teams are targeted on MQLs, and it's really easy to get MQLs nowadays. You can do content syndication and claim that that's an MQL. It's not most of the time, really. If we kind of look inwardly at ourselves, are we providing good quality leads in that scenario? Probably not as good as they could be. Are we really helping them? But often we're targeted on pipeline generation, then that leads to kind of us trying to force the sales members into updating Salesforce perhaps before there's really a genuine opportunity there, because we're focused on that. And then there's that misalignment of we get a kicking as a marketing function because the pipeline's not showing the signs of progress that was hoped. But on the sales side of the house, they don't want to put it in Salesforce because they'll get a kick in further down the track when it's closed lost and it's unqualified. And they'll be saying, well, why did you put it into Salesforce as an opportunity when it was never there? And I think there's that misalignment as well. I think on top of that, we talk slightly different languages despite really having the same goal. And I think we would also claim that as marketing, we should represent the voice of the customer and understand the customer better than anybody else. Is that genuinely true in a lot of cases? Probably not in many organizations that I've worked in, if I'm honest. Who knows the customers most of us? It's going to be the salespeople. They're the ones having the level of conversation, the detail, and the deep dives. And I think there's often a tension there because you read the books, you listen to the podcasts, and everybody says marketing's the voice of the customer and understands the customer better than anybody else. I don't think we do, and I think that can often lead to not unpleasantness, but some awkward conversations sometimes with sales teams where you think you're hitting the right target market, you think you're hitting the right job titles, and you're absolutely not.
Totally. Actually, in one case, many years ago, we changed the assets of a campaign mid-campaign because of that very same issue. Because we thought that we knew what were the customer's needs and what we were wanting to approach. But then after a very insightful conversations with sales, we found out that we were off target. And once we started actually implementing the feedback that sales was providing, it's when we started seeing changes in the conversions that we were having on the campaigns. So totally agree with you on that.
I think as well, sales teams are often incentivized individually on reaching a specific target. A large proportion of their salary will probably be based around that bonus. And it's really really for them to, be hitting that. And often the nature of a lot of people's personality, you go into sales roles, you are a control freak by nature. So handing off any part of the kind of process or, trusting someone else to do something for you, particularly marketing, can often be a tricky thing for a seller to do, I think.
But not only that, but the fact of the attribution, who gets the credit for the lead. Because in most cases, at least on what I've seen, both of us should get credit for who brings the lead in, because we just simply work them on different stages. Like marketing, it's the ones to get them to enter the funnel, and then usually the marketing funnel ends whenever a lead books a demo. But then sales, they have another different funnel that starts whenever a lead books a demo. And that handoff, as you mentioned, and that sort of sense of we're all getting credit for this. Yes, you're gonna get the commission, but that doesn't mean that you are the one that did all the work, because the lead wouldn't be here if marketing wouldn't have done all of the things that they did as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I've worked at organisations in the past, and it's worked both ways. Sometimes a deal is closed and it's been from a lead or a prospect that downloaded a piece of content perhaps 18 months before, and we work in tech, 18-month sales cycles aren't unheard of. But the deal was reinvigorated by a well-placed phone call at the right time from a BDR perhaps, or an email from a sales guy that's kind of just almost given up on it, but thinks one last roll of the dice. Who gets the credit in that scenario? And I think there's a deeper conversation that probably isn't in scope for today around kind of attribution and attribution modeling and things. I think whoever actually genuinely cracks that is going to make an awful lot of money at some point, because first such attribution is rubbish. My personal view. Last touch is if it was genuine last touch, attribution is always going to be a salesperson. Not many deals are signed by the marketing team, are there? There's always a seller involved at that point. But is that kind of put down in Salesforce? It's unlikely to be. It's going to be the last marketing touch point they have. So it's never genuinely a true attribution. I also think there's a bit of a disconnect sometimes between, particularly in complex cycles. We might attract a ebook download or a white paper download from somebody at a manager level. They are very irregularly going to be the decision maker for a deal. They're not going to be the budget holder. So then we are kind of reliant on the sales guys to really nurture that relationship and use that relationship to get the intro to. It might be the CFO, it might be the CTO or CIO in the role that I'm kind of operating now, or somebody at a higher level. Again, who gets the credit there? Where was the lead? Where was the opportunity really sourced? Was it at somebody lower down the chain, or was it further up? And I think I don't know the answer to that. That's something that I kind of battle with and have conversations with fairly regularly. If you bring somebody that is outside of your ICP, but you manage to strike up a conversation through introductions, through networking, etc., with somebody that fits the ICP, I would argue that marketing has done the job there. They've brought the company the right accounting. Have they brought the right person? Possibly not. And I think that goes back to an earlier point around kind of they want sales-ready prospects at an individual level. But I'd also argue that with a lot of marketing content, it's very irregular that you would see a CIO or CTO genuinely downloading a piece of content that they see on LinkedIn or a content syndication piece. Is generally going to be lower down. And similarly, they might see things, not download it, but then go and ask somebody that reports into them to go and research options in the area, and then you're one of many probably that is being kind of considered at that point. And there's so much talk around kind of how much activity you don't see, and you can never capture that with any form of attribution, despite all of the tools that claim to be able to do that.
And how do you navigate the challenge of attribution? Because you need to demonstrate to sales and to the rest of the organization that you're actually doing things for the company, and not only sales is actually doing the job. So how do you have those conversations with the rest of the organization?
I think, one of the things that I have, done in my roles, which has been quite powerful, is actually if you're looking at an account that we are currently engaged in a live opportunity with, it is mapping out all of the touch points prior to that part that marketing has been involved with to help deliver them to get to that point of the website whether that's website conversion, whether that's they had someone's email from a while ago. There are numerous personas across the organization that will have been engaging with marketing that you've been doing. And I think that is actually a really kind of powerful story for the sales team to see, because they're not really often that interested in that. And it kind of is like a bit of a light bulb moment, like, oh, okay, right. Wait, he was at that event. Wait, they've engaged with they joined that webinar. Oh, and that person was here. Oh, okay. And then I see on the date that they filled in that form there, that adds up with there. So I found that is quite a powerful tool to use, because it visually shows that there is an awful lot that goes on and goes into marketing, which can sometimes often be overlooked, because a lead may arrive in a seller's lap, a really good sort of warm lead, and they'll think marketing has had nothing to do with that. So I think that has definitely been powerful.
%. Talking in a probabilistic way, like showing this number of impressions or this number of touch points actually help you convert customers in this percentage more than if you don't do that. I think that helps a lot with that alignment.
I definitely agree with what Isabel is saying. We've had the same approach. And something interesting for us is that all of those touch points before a lead actually reaches sales are great pieces of conversation for sales whenever they're reaching out to a lead. Because if, I don't know, they might be downloading X report, the topic of that report can be a great like intro point for them to actually start discussing with the lead. Same if they attend to an event, that could be the starting point of the conversation. We have seen in the past as well that there are obviously many tools that can help us with data enrichment, but to me, it's always fascinating how everything that's digital can be perfectly tracked, and you can see exactly like from which campaign they came from, which assets they're interested in, which emails they open, which links they click, and having all sort of like that round knowledge about someone, to me it's very powerful.
Yeah, I think I'd probably echo that, and kind of an example of what Isabel mentioned was I remember having a conversation in a previous life with a sales director, and he said, "Oh, we've got an opportunity with a big fuel and convenience retailer," and it came around because one of the sales guys had picked up the phone and managed to get hold of the CIO. And I said, "Well, that's really nice that you think that it was all on just your seller. Well done to her." But I can show you 5 recent touch points where they've downloaded high value content. And was it the CIO? No, it wasn't. Was it people that I can show you report into the CIO? So the CIO was probably at some point asked for some research around the solution that we had to offer at that point. Then when you picked up the phone and said, "Hello, I'm calling from the company I was working for at the time," he's already aware of it. And that helps with the cold calling, that helps with the conversation. I think oftentimes, and we're really lucky now, we've got kind of so much data at our fingertips and so much customer journey stuff. But in his head, it was a very linear journey of sales picked up the phone, had a conversation with the CIO, who was absolutely the right person to speak to, and now there was an opportunity where there wasn't before. And that bit's kind of irrefutable. But all of the influence, all of the kind of cross-threading and multi-threading of that account that had gone on before was in their mind kind of overlooked, and until we were able to point out that there's this, and this was from within a month of that phone call taking place. I think it's really important that we, as marketers, we advocate sometimes when it's necessary to, and show the impact. And it's got to be shown. You can't just say it. You need to show them kind of what has happened and go into a little bit of detail sometimes that I think often we just say, "Oh yeah, no, we've been targeting those with ads." You don't always see a click or whatever. You can't get that level of detail. But if they start to interact, if they download a piece of content, you've got the details. You can track them through HubSpot or Salesforce or whatever platform of your choice, and you can see that they're looking at web pages, they're looking at blogs, they're going back, they're really doing their research. And it may not always be the person that your sales team are engaging with, because there are so many people. And I don't know what the latest stats say about buying committees in B2B, but I think at one point I read there's 26 people involved in a typical kind of enterprise deal. It's illogical to assume that you, as a salesperson or anybody, you're going to know everybody that's within that buying committee. There's going to be people working in silos. There's going to be people contributing from all over. You can never really clearly show kind of 100% attribution one way or the other in that case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So we know that, well, we know a little bit about the challenges of sales and marketing alignment. Then we discuss like how we can tell a story with numbers and data and using all those touch points that we know and we can track. But what other frameworks, rituals, or processes have you used to build alignment?
I've worked, like the best companies in which I have worked with have a clear language in between sales and marketing. Particularly where I'm currently working at, we're becoming really good at speaking the same language in between teams. And the way we've done that is through documentation. We're documenting everything. If there is, like, for example, if we're talking about leads, from A to Z, what's going on with the leads, what's happening with the leads when they enter Salesforce, how's the scoring model for the leads, everything that has to do with leads, we are documenting it, and we are sort of like doing training sessions to other teams so they can understand how everything is working. And it has made a great impact on the organization, because it helps us, as I mentioned before, it helps us speak the same language. It helps us being clear on what we're rooting for, what the alignment is, what the process is, and at the end, a bit of communication goes a long way. And I think transparency as well, it has helped a lot, making sure that there is data trust in between what marketing is reporting and what sales is reporting, and that we are all in agreement with the data and with what we're showing, making sure that it's 100% truthful and definitely transparent in between teams, has helped a lot as well.
What about the rest? Documentation, transparency, that looks great.
Sorry, I'm a big fan of just a regular call and kind of a run through of things and kind of trying to align where best as possible. And, things change, campaigns change, target accounts change, and it's not always communicated. Sometimes a prospect, it becomes really clear that they're not going to be ready to buy, and we would then be wasting marketing dollars. So if you know about that, you can go back and you can take them out of your targeting, because the sales guys have had those conversations. It's a chance, and it's a chance to be heard both ways. We've all got access to things like intent data and a huge amount of insight that we probably haven't had in the past. So if somebody's showing signs, we can ask for that to be prioritized, and really align kind of that way. And I think it's also a chance to just let the salesperson be heard. And I think Gracia said about kind of transparency. Sometimes you've got to hold your hands up and say, we've got this wrong. We've got the targeting wrong. The content doesn't resonate, whatever it might be. But don't just say that. It's really easy to say this isn't working. How are you going to fix it? How are you going to change things to try and drive greater conversions, to try and improve the quality of the leads, to try and do whatever it is that isn't working? But similarly, kind of you expect that on the other side as well. So if it's been really slow, really hard to follow up on an MQL, why? And what can we do together to make it a cohesive experience and a cohesive journey from kind of inquiry stage through to whatever the journey is, at point of the journey is at that moment in time. So for me, it's kind of a regular call, it's a regular touch point, and it's allowing for just a dialogue. Nobody wants to be kind of presented at in those sorts of calls. It's got to be an open conversation.
And also documenting those regular calls, or is just open conversations? Because how do you ensure that knowledge that is embedded in those calls in the organization is actually shared with the rest?
I think that's quite hard in a lot of cases, because what applies, so the way in my current role that things are set up, we've got distinct kind of verticals that we're selling into. And whilst it's similar job titles, similar personas that we're targeting, each of them have got a slightly different challenge, but also what works in one industry doesn't necessarily work in the other. I guess I am that. In my case, I am that focal point between what kind of one segment is saying they're seeing success with, what one is struggling with, and then being the conduit to see if that's a common theme. And then I'm also the conduit into the other disciplines within marketing. So our corporate team, our integrated campaigns team and digital team and product teams as well. So for me, it's quite difficult at times, because what one person is seeing isn't necessarily universal, but it can be really siloed. So if you change everything, then you actually damage the overall health of a pipeline or a lead generation campaign. And sometimes it's you've got to have those hard conversations and say, yes, I know you've got some short-term pain. This campaign isn't working for you. We're not going to stop it. We're not going to change anything. But how do we move up? How do we move forward? Maybe it's a new content piece. Maybe it's a slightly different type of messaging for the same audience. And that's the conversation that I think you have to have. And it doesn't always need to be shared more widely and kind of formally documented. It can again be kind of within those touch points and conversations that we have, and sometimes that can be over a coffee or whatever. But that for me has kind of been how it's been working recently. And we haven't always got it right. Sometimes we've got it wrong, and sometimes there's been updates that nobody has passed on because it's not the priority for the conversation that day. And you end up getting to it later in the day.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think, one of the ways that it's nothing groundbreaking really, but like shared pipeline reviews are so important. But I guess it's almost like, what is the objective of those sessions? And they're not just a stale, dry, like reporting session where you go through, right, we've generated this many MQLs and right, here we go, here's the number of opportunities. It's more about making it like a working session where you can walk through live deals together. Again, that might be the first chance for whatever reason that you have visibility or something, and vice versa for the sales team. And then I think that is also like a really helpful kind of point as well, to be understanding where leads might be getting stuck, and then you can collaborate together on how to unblock them. And it also, as Sean has said, it gives us direct insight into what's landing and potentially what's not in sales conversations. So the actual conversations that the sales team are having on the front line with customers or with prospects. And then sales, vice versa, they get visibility into how leads are being nurtured and how the different content or events that they're engaging with. And I think it is a helpful shift from a conversation of just a bit finger pointing almost sometimes, like your leads aren't converting, to kind of more about how can we move this forward together. And it's very much about using those sessions, to create a really healthy operating environment, and one where we can see each other as kind of co-owners of growth. And again, that comes back down to replacing kind of siloed KPIs and having, real shared success criteria across sales and marketing. Traditionally, we've said it like I think a million times between us already, but like you're measured on the volume of marketing leads generated, and it is so easy. A marketing lead can be quite easy to generate, but the sales team's measured on closed revenue. So if we're shifting it more along the lines of like pipeline velocity or marketing influence revenue, not just the MQL measure, then again, I think that is a more helpful kind of like holistic metric for us to be looking at to help change things.
Usually, before even launching a campaign or even a product per se, we as marketers worked to create buying personas and to understand who would be the people who would benefit from that product and what do these people think about, what are the issues that they face, or if in this case that is everything like B2B, like the companies, what issues are they facing, what problem do they need to solve. Based on that, we do the campaigns. Definitely the issues that sales might present, I think that they should be taken into consideration as long as the issues are in relation to the lead, like they're passing on feedback of what the leads or customers are complaining about, things that we might not be seeing and that we could fix.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's valuable. If it's addressing a need in the market, and as Isabel said, definitely. But if it's a sales issue per se, not so much. Maybe in that case, sales should change the strategy instead of us trying to change the need in the market.
Yeah, I think that comes kind of back to tactics, really, doesn't it? And like adopting your tactics slightly. But I think fundamentally you should always be leading with what's the problem that we're trying to solve here.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes it's really hard to get to the crux of the problem, though. So we as marketers generally have probably a fairly good handle on the bigger picture problems. You can identify that people want to go through digital transformation, or they want to implement some form of agentic AI is the topic at the moment that we're seeing a lot of. But actually, do they? When you really get into the nuts and bolts of kind of what are the problems that we're trying to solve for them, why do they want to do that? And yes, you get a huge amount of insight from the sales guys, but I think it's the Ehrenberg Bass Institute said that it's kind of the 95-5 rule. There's only 5% that are in market at any one time. So how many people are your salespeople talking to? How big a representation of that 5% is it, let alone the 100? So, where do you change tax? Where do you change messaging? Is it when 2 people have said that they've got the same problem? Is it when 5 people have said they've got the same problem? Where do you shift and adjust? And when do you stick with what kind of the Gartners and the analysts and people like that are saying are the problems in those industries? There's almost too much information out there to really make informed decisions sometimes, because then you're just getting layer and layer of complexity once you take kind of anecdotal or qualitative feedback as well. Where do you draw the line? How many people have got to say this is a problem before you start to believe that that's a problem, when the consensus would be that that's a small problem for a small number of people, and you should you necessarily discount those guys as well? I guess is kind of the problem that we battle with as marketers, isn't it? When do we pivot? When do we stick with what we think is going to work? And then it comes down to kind of some of those kind of KPIs and metrics that we talked about earlier. Because if we're still driving MQLs or conversations for the sales guys based on a core level of messaging, at what level do you pivot the messaging? Do you still lead with that hero messaging? Do you then, as the conversations progress, start to drip feed some other more specific content for certain industries? I don't know if segmentation is always the way to go, because sometimes there are bigger problems that apply more universally, and you can generate that initial awareness and initial interest from a broader campaign.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that is why brand is so important in B2B, isn't it? And it's often the one that's kind of the hardest battle to fight internally for budget, but the organizations that do this so well are pouring into the big sort of media outlets for brand building media, like whether that's TV, whether that's radio. And it is so important for B2B, because we like to think that we're rational beings that make rational decisions. We're not, we're completely emotional. And, having a strong brand presence across multiple touch points is really, really key.
Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think in B2B particularly, we sometimes forget that the person behind the persona is just that, they're a person. They still want to make the decision that they feel is right for a business. They've got pressures, they've got emotions, they've got certain drivers, and I've made decisions as a B2B buyer based on who I had the best conversations with for a similar product. Who did I build a rapport with the most during the purchasing phase and the kind of the consideration phase, if we want to use some
Yeah.
really rubbish marketing language. At what point does it stop being? Every technology company claims to be a leading technology company in insert space here, and they all look the same and they all sound the same. So it's hard. How do you differentiate? And that's something to Isabel's point. I think the ones that are brave and go with some brand stuff and sometimes push the envelope and learn from kind of the marketers in the B2C space that aren't afraid to push boundaries sometimes and be really genuinely creative. I think that's when you start to see some really disruptive brands and some really big shifts in market in B2B.
I've also noticed that having your point of differentiation very clear and using that in marketing, it's always to your advantage. And understanding like what you do versus what your competitors do, it's also really important. I've worked at companies in which we were selling different similar products to the competition, but our product would do certain things that the competition would not. And I remember that in that particular company, marketing and sales, we were really involved with each other. We would even attend like the sales kickoff because they wanted us to see and to have a full understanding of what they were doing, how they were approaching the accounts, how they were communicating the message to leads. And the biggest strategy that they would implement was that it was just differentiation. And it was like, yes, we can, like, the competition can do this, but we can do this, and that. And this is what we're different. And the reason why we're different is the reason why you should pick us. And it worked. Like, that company used to be really great. And I say used to be because it was acquired by another company. So now that company doesn't exist anymore. And it was just amazing because they thrived on being different.
I think that's a really interesting point, Chris, because I think often we look at differentiation and kind of particularly in the technology space in B2B, it's what's the differentiation between the products. And actually sometimes there's very little to choose between products, and things that really matter to the product team or the product marketing team don't really matter to the buyers. And actually sometimes the differentiation can come down to something that seemingly very few people in B2B want to talk about. It's the people within the organization. That can be a massive sell. If you've got incredible support, if you've got incredible onboarding teams, if you've got people that are going to pick up the phone within 5 minutes or respond to an email within 5 minutes, instead of being in an endless loop of chatbots and support tickets and things, that can be a real differentiator in certain markets. But it's not sexy or cool, is it? Saying our people are really good. But sometimes that is the differentiator in certain markets, where especially where it's a commodity sale. Everybody can offer certain things that are the same, but it's the people or something that is thinking a little bit outside of the box, and it shouldn't be, that really drives the differentiation. In a lot of cases, so many products out there are, it's a black box, isn't it? You could put a different logo on it and say, is this any different to what you were last looking at? And a lot of people wouldn't be able to tell you the difference. So sometimes I think we struggle to pick differentiation, and sometimes it can be as simple as just the people or something similar.
Or price, but that's one for another day.
Yeah, and then you've kind of got two ways there. You don't ever want to be stuck in the middle. You've either got to go premium or bargain basement, and I know which one I would rather be.
Definitely. No, I totally agree with you. Particularly because it's as you mentioned before, at the end, the other people behind the screen is just that, is another human being. And if you have a good product, you can say, but you know what, we installed the product in just 15 minutes. You don't have to go to the hurdles of going through many, many meetings and many work hours to get the product in 15 minutes you're just in. Like, that's a great differentiator. Just the fact that you make it easy to be, you're easy to work with. Like your company is easy to work with, and you're not a hurdle for any other company you're trying to do business with.
Definitely, customers, they don't want more complication, right? They want easy processes. All right, so we've covered a lot today, from diagnosing the alignment issues to sharing what's working and imagining the ideal sales and marketing relationship. I want to say thank you so much for your collaboration. It's been a great episode, great conversation. And for our audience, if you like this episode, please give us a like and reviews, and we will love to share your comments also in this podcast. So thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you soon.